This is an expression of an asset-based economic system that's coming like a freight train at this point. The monetary system as we know it today probably is not going to survive.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for October 27th through November 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 1-ounce gold Valcambi Combi Bars that can be broken into 10 1/10-ounce bars are just $215 over spot. Next, 90% constitutional silver is just 30 cents over spot per ounce. Finally, assorted silver rounds are just $2.99 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. It's my delight to interview a new guest we've never had before, Patrick Wood, who has been described as the living expert on technocracy. He's also the publisher at Coherent Publishing. He's the owner of the Technology News newsletter and website. Joins us this very first time. It's Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. Patrick, thank you for coming on Liberty and Finance this first time.
My pleasure.
I'm so impressed with the depth and breadth of the thought and writing that you've done on the topic of technocracy, its origins, its development, its basically takeover of a major portion of our public and private lives that I don't hardly know where to begin. But perhaps I should give you a chance, maybe just in your elevator speech of what is technocracy, and then we'll take it from there.
You bet. Well, technocracy was an economic system that was modeled in 1932 at Columbia University. And when I say it's an economic system, that's exactly what they intended to make. They thought capitalism was dead. They thought the banking system was corrupt. They thought that they would get rid of money altogether, and they would base the resource-based economic system on energy consumption and production. So it's a very radical. You expect that from Columbia University. It was very radical in that day, and it had a huge impact, however, on America for sure, because there was over 500,000 dues-paying, card-carrying members of technocracy across the country, especially in the West, and they held meetings to talk about technocracy, and it was kind of the rage for a while, and it died out after the war started, but it was taken up again in at least 1970 or so by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was a professor at Columbia University. So he understood the ins and outs of technocracy. And he wrote a book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. They didn't use the term technocratic at Columbia because of other reasons, but it was banned, basically. It's a word. You'd get fired if you said that word. So he recast it as the Technotronic Era. This is where we are today. Brzezinski and David Rockefeller teamed up to start the Trilateral Commission in 1973 based on this book. And when Rockefeller, the money guy, he was the chairman of Chase Bank at that point, and in his mind, he saw this as a way to escape the money system and get resources directly into his hands, not the money representing the resources, but get the resources themselves under his control. So when I started writing about the Trilateral Commission in 1977 or so, we saw it as basically an asset grab or a land grab. That's where all the resources are in the first place, in the land. And this view has not changed over the years, in my opinion. And what we see going on today all around the world is basically the resources of the world are being stripped away from the people of the world and the nation states as well. So technocracy was insidious. It was always based on technology. They talked about the science of social engineering as well, because they figured, well, if they're going to manage all the resources of the world, they have to account for people as well. And so they invented this thing called the science of social engineering. That's not a science, of course, but you get the picture. They wanted to manipulate people into accepting what they are trying to do. This is epidemic at this point. The social engineering that's going on all around us, the propaganda, the gaslighting, the psychological operations is just crazy over the top at this point. But this is an expression of technocracy. Maybe I should start or stop there rather and give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, and I just want to whet people's appetite here, because in your interviews that you've done about this, you've talked about the eugenic roots and associations of the philosophies that led to technocracy. You've talked about globalist philosophies, this idea that there's always this greater good. You can keep bubbling it up. It's not the individual, and how it's a complete inversion of the American principles, and frankly of Judeo-Christian principles of the primacy of the individual as a made in the image and likeness of God. Thirdly, you've talked in some of your interviews about how it tends to put euphemistic front representations of itself while having very ugly aims in the background that would just turn people's stomachs if they knew what was coming. But one of those ways of getting in front is to say, it's about science. It's all about science. We're going to follow the science. And where have we heard that recently? So people need to know about that. But one thing that really jumped out at me was at the very last of a three-part interview you did recently, you said, it says, nobody to my knowledge in the economic world has considered that there are two economic systems fighting for control over the world right now. One is capitalism and one is technocracy. One's going to die and one's going to live. Question is, which one? Will capitalism survive, or will it truly be supplanted by technocracy? And it says there are two economic systems. They're not just like oil and water. They're worse than that. They cannot exist. They're almost like matter and antimatter. They cannot exist in the same space. One will die and one will live. We're fascinated to hear more about that. So I'm going to try to keep my questions short so that you can take the time. The first is, can you help us understand very briefly what does the origins and philosophy of technocracy, which sounds like something new, like newfangled, like modern technology, like AI related or something, but its roots go way back, and how it's related to, where does it get born, and where its roots related to, for example, eugenics.
The worldview that existed at that time amongst these technocrats, these were the senior engineers and scientists at Columbia University, and there was other universities at the time that contributed people as well, but mostly it was Columbia. Their attitude at that point, their worldview, was totally mechanistic versus what was before that, a religious worldview that was based on the Bible and other things, Judeo-Christian ethics, morality. And the mechanistic attitude that posited, well, everything can be understood from a mechanistic viewpoint. If we could figure out how stuff works in the first place, then we could fix it, then we can engineer it, then we can change it. So the rush was on to look into nature and systems of things, how people work, with each other, how society works, and the science of social engineering as well. So they set out to discover everything that pertained to the actions of men and the interaction of ecosystems and how the world works. And, they drilled down into every possible nook and cranny to understand the world. Well, it's starting to backfire on them, by the way, because when you look into things too deeply, you get in big trouble. And this has been expressed in the last century with studies of scientism, for instance, which is the worship of science. When you look into nature and the systems of things too deeply, you become captured by those systems. You become the slave of those systems rather than the controller of those systems. So the mechanistic attitude at that point, it rejected anything to do with God, and they said, no, that's old way of thinking, and there's no way that we can have progress unless we figure out how everything works. That's where they started. And they've continued this progression of looking into things, if you will, with anything scientific, whether it's engineering or science, theoretical science or practical applied science. They've pursued this the quest of looking into everything. So you see today, for instance, genetic engineering. It's all over the space. You can't hardly see past the overt desire to engineer every living thing on the planet. Where did this come from? Well, it came from that era, and this is just the natural extension of this at this point. I posted an article basically recently on the IUCN, this large conservation organization associated with the UN, and they have created a policy document on synthetic biology. Well, what is synthetic biology? Well, it's the mixing and matching of genetic material between species and even within species, and they think this is a good thing. Well, you can see that if they're left to themselves, they're going to actually destroy the world at some point when they're going to flip the wrong switch because they don't really understand what they're doing in the first place, but they think they can get there if they just pursue it. So all I have to say that the worldview that they started out was very poor. It was totally anti-God, anti-human. And here we are today. And the expression of technocracy today is expressed in, well, for instance, the what they call convergent science at this point. This is practiced in all universities around the world. It combines the disciplines of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science. And basically, this is trying to examine everything in the world and fit it into this mold where they can take control over everything in the world. Crazy stuff. It really is crazy.
And related to this sort of playing God, what about the eugenics roots of technocracy?
Well, yeah, like I said, I wanted to get into the genetic part. Maybe I should have rewound, but the modern attack on genetic material stems from the original goals of eugenics program in the first place to change the gene pool. They didn't have the tools back then. All they could do is say, well, if we don't like you, or if you're mentally retarded or something, we're going to take you out of the gene pool so you can't reproduce. That was the simple answer for them at the time. And it was very ugly. There was lots of eugenics programs in America that just stand your hair on end. And then, of course, well, maybe I should say this started basically in Berkeley, at the University of California, but then it went into Nazi Germany in a heartbeat. And it was picked up, the practices of eugenics were picked up by the Nazi Party and Hitler. That ended very poorly for all the people that were subject to it. My life story, by the way, you might have seen this in the video that you looked at with Richard Grove. My mother, my foster mother, if you will, I was adopted when I was a baby, but nevertheless, my mother was not my natural mother because she was, we were living close to Berkeley at that time, Northern California, and the doctors who practiced eugenics figured out somehow that there was a genetic flaw in our bloodline. It turned out later there was no flaw, but they thought it was. So her mother took her to a hospital and at age 17 and sterilized my mother so she couldn't have kids. And they said, well, that will fix your problem. You're not going to have any genetic, malfunctions or whatever. And that, of course, you might imagine that embittered my mother against her mother all her life. Who didn't end well for my mother for sure. But that's how I was adopted. I wasn't even in America at that point, but my parents, my birth parents were refugees from Holland, and they landed in San Francisco, and they had me right after the boat, and they had no money, so they put me up for adoption, and that's how I ended up with the family that I had, right? So this eugenics nonsense, it really touched my life big time. And that practice, by the way, the eugenics practice was not outlawed in California until 1968. Unbelievable that it persisted for that long. But evil things, they have a way of persisting, and it's hard to get rid of them. So anyway, eugenics was a big thing back then. It's a big thing right now as well.
You mentioned that we're going to have to circle back to that last comment that you made about evil things have a way of persisting, because you point out in some of your interviews and you mentioned just now briefly how a philosophy or technology that sprouted up in California, then jumped over and was adopted by Hitler and the Nazi Party, and then how after the war, Operation Paperclip, he went into some detail about how that was brought right back, and the same scientists who were working one month in their desks in Nazi Germany were working the next month in their desks in high positions in the U.S., and it mattered not to them. We don't know about individuals how they felt about it, but from a philosophical standpoint, it mattered less to them that they were working for this country or this political system or that political system than that they were just advancing this particular, I guess you'd call it a pseudo-religion of basically playing God. Any comments on that and how that ties in with this notion of globalism, that what really matters is this sort of this greater good, and so it matters not if you're on Team A or Team B or Team C. You're working for this global ultimate utopia.
It's interesting. It's interesting that the concept of globalism, it goes way back in our history, even back to the founding of our country. The New World Order is printed on all of our currency. What is it called? I can't get the phrase out. But the Latin term for New World Order is not all of our currency. There has always been a push for unifying the world under one system. In fact, even going back to the Bible story of the Tower of Babel, when the whole world, they said, was one language and it was all together to do a project building this tower. Well, you see this is reoccurred in history all the time. And this is what we have today is an expression of that. Even starting in 1973, when the Trilateral Commission was formed, one of the complaints that they expressed openly, well, we haven't been successful to create this new world order. So far, we've failed with all of our, they call them the frontal approaches. So they said that, well, we're going to try a new strategy. We're going to do an end run around national sovereignty. And so they took off on a new tangent, if you will, to kind of recast globalization in a new light. And this is the light we see today, by the way, with technocracy. The whole thing was started with technocracy in the first place, and it's ended up now, the ugly system that it is. But the forces of globalization have always been there behind all these systems over the years. But technocracy has been the one that's gained the most traction of any system in history to bring the whole world together as one.
The term science or follow the science or this is about scientific and everything, the science is worth it. The research is worth it is what we're told recently, can justify almost anything, almost things that can't even be imagined from a horror movie standpoint can be justified if you say it's just all about the learning, it's all about the science. But you also point out in your writing and speaking that some of the most anti-scientific endeavors conceived are represented as science, because that seems to be something that you can get people to stop thinking and stop questioning you. Do you want to expand on that at all?
This book by Wesley Smith, The War on Humans, this is basically describing the technocratic assault, the environmental assault against humanity. And he expresses my sentiment that there is a war on humans. It's pointedly anti-human, and is revealing itself more and more as an outright war on every function of humanity. So when you talk about the anti-human nature of scientism, the worship of science, the mechanistic worldview, technocracy, transhumanism as well. All of these things are anti-human in the end. If they're not attacking the body directly, it's attacking your soul for sure, and what it means to be human. I've seen this concept or the ideology of the war on humans, not because of his book, by the way, but I've seen this from many people over the years. They conclude when they study what's going on, this is anti-human. Well, it is because they're bent on destructing humanity. And this is really ugly. It's going to end very badly for the human race if these people continue on their quest right now.
You also talk about how the roots of this got into the educational system, and not just the education system, but those who train the educators to make sure that the next generations of students were brought up in this world viewpoint that you're describing. Can you talk about how early that started and why parents who aren't aware of this right now, that are just dutifully sending their children off to the government schools, not only in the U.S., but in other countries, are unwittingly handing over their irreplaceable, beautiful, unique children into a philosophical environment that is absolutely hostile to them, to the family, and to the children directly?
Exactly. Well, that's a good point. Good point. Education goes way back. The globalist education, where students were intended to be indoctrinated into the global mindset, We can go back and look at people like John Dewey, for instance, the kind of the founder of modern education in the first place. Those types of mechanistic expressions of education, that was transferred into technocracy for sure. Here you have the whole thing being created in the first place at Columbia University. That was the pinnacle of progressive thought at that time in history, right? And also, we have to remember that the New School was an offshoot of Columbia University. That's the New School. That's the name of the company, of the university. The New School was intended to reform education across the country, and it did indeed in the world. And it wasn't just progressive thinking that they wanted to get across, but they trained teachers, university teachers and secondary school teachers, to go out into the system specifically to indoctrinate students with these principles. This is with us today. We saw the Common Core education system that was presented by Bill Gates in United Nations a few years ago. That was just an outgrowth of that at that point. So how many times have we seen education being reformed over my lifetime anyway, 50 years from in the past? At least 5 or 6 times. They didn't get it right one time, then we'll just do this over here. So education has been reformed and remolded several times. The philosophy that seems to be coming out now is, well, you really don't need an education to be successful in the tech world. You can just go out, learn how to code, and make get a great idea, and you can make $1 billion. And so, people like Peter Thiel they're encouraging people, drop out of college right now and go and start your dream job or whatever, your new idea, startup company sort of thing. And so you have kind of the anti-education now to deny people information that might help them in their work and their life. Now they're saying, no, you really don't need that, because now we have artificial intelligence to give you all that other stuff about human endeavors. And so you can just, learn as you go sort of thing. This has really turned the world upside down for education.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned there, I think in passing, is that it's devoid of the classical education, devoid of the true, authentic understanding of human history and the learnings that have come from that, so that instead, no, you don't need it. AI will take care of all of that for you. Just go do your thing. So it's not only getting people, well, and ironically, the careers that are supposedly most on the chopping block due to AI are computer programming. So when you mention learning to code as doing your thing, that's gonna have a very short life cycle. But this notion of the loss of human wisdom that resonates in people's in their gut, in their heart. We've been talking with our audience a lot about that recently, because of the preponderance of fake news or AI deep fakes, and we've given some examples of that recently to our audience. What about that? Severing young people from their families, severing traditional roles from the church, severing from scriptural tradition, severing from human cultural wisdom. Why has that been so necessary by these advocates of a new world order?
This is the breakdown of society. It's been intentional over the years. It's being expressed today with, say through AI, that's a tool that they're using to shuck the oyster, so to speak. But young people today are being divorced from their parents. They're being divorced from each other. They're being divorced from meaningful activity in their life. That's human-centered creativity. And they're being recreated as standalone units. And here they are. They tend to go psychotic at some point. They tend to snap. They tend to commit suicide. You see, all of this stuff is anti-human. And when you strip humanity away from people, this is the condition they get in. This is where they find themselves. Parents, and by the way, this is a warning for parents. If you don't understand what AI companion apps are, parents, if you have young children, you better get on the ball right now and figure it out today what they're dealing with. If they're touching any of these AI companion apps, you'll lose your kid in a country minute, and you wake up one day and you won't know who he is. Parents are saying this openly now. Their children, they stop talking to us. All of a sudden, they're not talking even to their brothers and sisters. They're holding up in their room. They don't even want to come out to eat practically. And they get antisocial, and they start yelling at us, and making all these wild claims and stuff. This is a sign of psychosis. One of the major things that AI is doing right now is promoting psychosis on a large scale throughout society. Where will this end? I can't say. I'm not a psychologist. Not a shrink, right? But I know enough to say if you get enough people exhibiting psychotic behavior at the same time, you'll end up in total chaos.
There's two more main points I wanted to make sure that we get a chance to talk about. Obviously, this is going to be very critical and important, fruitful turf for us to cover again in the future. The name of our channel is Liberty and Finance. So I want to talk to you about the liberty, the freedom aspect, and the financial aspect. So first, the freedom. You've talked about how the technocratic philosophy and this globalist mindset views not individuals as sacred people, persons, souls that deserve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but instead like members of a herd, just that need to be managed, controlled, engineered, and taken care of, and by others who are superior to them. Can you first address that, the attack on freedom?
Wow. Well, obviously, it is anti-freedom for sure, because if they view the technocrat mind and the transhuman mind both view humans as part of the resource pool, if you will, like the cattle in the field and the trees in the forest, whatever. We're just resources to be managed in their mind. Now, from my perspective, that's absolutely wrong-headed. We're not to be managed by anybody, because free will gives us the opportunity to make our own decisions in life. And that's totally antithetic to where technocracy takes you. So they had no problem, for instance, imposing an experimental drug on humanity 4 years ago with what I call the Great Panic of 2020, where 72% of the world got at least 1 or 2 shots. Who has the power? Who has the influence to to get 72% of the world's population to give a medical treatment, an experimental one as well. And they didn't have any consent of the public to do it in the first place. They just did it as an experiment. This has been proven now time and time again. It was a medical experiment foisted on the whole world. This is, wow. This is not where freedom is, for sure. And I saw the Great Panic of 2020 as the first assault, the first assault wave of technocracy to take over the world. I saw it clearly, even in February, March of 2020. I saw exactly what was happening, not based on the outcome at that point, but because of the people who were promoting the whole thing in the first place. I saw them rolling over onto this new paradigm to control the health of the world. And you see how destructive it was for our freedom to get locked down, to have to be in our house and being afraid to go outside, and you're going to, breathe the air and that whole thing. Well, this is, when we talk about freedom, when we talk about the rights, the unalienable rights that we have, not because the Constitution says it, that these rights were given by God in the first place. They can't be taken away from people, obviously, but these technocrats and transhumans, they have no problem to say, you don't have those rights anymore. You have no rights for freedom, liberty, and even the bodily functions that you have. You're not free with them either.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk about inalienable rights that can't be taken away, that's literally what the reality is. They cannot be taken away because they weren't given by you, but you can disregard them, you can trample them, you can do all kinds of things. As Stephen Covey says, you can't break the laws of nature, you can only break yourselves against them, and they're breaking individuals, they're breaking families, they're breaking cultures, they're breaking nations. One more point before we go, and that's about the economic aspects, liberty and finance as the finance part. And that gets back to that quote that I read from the transcript of your interview that I was referring to you about. It says, capitalism, one is fighting for the control of the whole world right now. One is capitalism, one is technocracy. One's going to die and one's going to live. They cannot exist together like matter and antimatter. Help us understand, because this sounds like otherworldly stuff to people who are just trying to hold it together here, trying to make sure that they can provide for their family and that they have something for the next generation, that there's going to be a future that people are going to look forward to. To help us understand what you mean by technocracy, because we're being told, just like we were being told, education's for the kids, guys, and all those lockdowns of 2020 is for the good of your health and your community. We're always looking out for your best interest. We're also being told that technology is going to be your friend. It's going to make everything more efficient, is a key word that you talked to us about several times in a lot of your other interviews, is efficiency as a kind of an end to itself. But what about that financial incompatibility between technocracy and, for example, capitalism?
I'm going to try to summarize it, I think. We grew up in a debt-based system, economic system, based on free market economics, mostly, based on supply and demand that was measured in terms of money. If supply of a good increased, the prices would go down, and if it was scarce, the price would go up, and somehow the unseen hand of the economy balanced everything out. Well, the supply and demand and the debt-based system that we've been used to for all these years, we understand it innately, and it's been flawed for sure with the Federal Reserve and the inflation and the robbing of all the wealth we've had over the years. But nevertheless, that was our system, right? That's what we're used to, and we learned to cope with it, hopefully. But at this point in time, there's a new economic system that's going to flip that on its head, where, and this is the risk, that there's a possibility that the world is going to be flipped into an asset-based system versus a debt-based system. The best way I can, this is hard to understand how that could happen, because we understand what went before. But one way to understand it is to take a look at Islamic banking, for instance. Islamic banking does not recognize debt at all. They don't have any capacity to create debt, and of course, they can't create money either that way. But they're using processes that takes assets and making them into the monetary system. This is resource management. And this is the pinnacle of resource management, is to take the assets of the world and monetize them. Now we know how this is going to be done with tokenization of everything in the universe. And so the system that's being created right now by the Trump administration, it's going to morph into an asset-based economic system that will get rid of debt altogether, where the assets of the world will be owned by a few people, the oligarchs, the BlackRocks, etc. The assets of the world will be owned by a few people, maybe sovereign wealth funds as well. And the people of the world will be on the outside of asset ownership. The reason I'm making a big deal of this, private property has always been the pinnacle of economic development throughout history. Private property. In our country, capitalism was built on private property. Most businesses in like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, most businesses, small businesses were started based on the equity that somebody had in their home, and they borrowed money and they started a business, and boom, they got successful. Some failed, but others succeeded. And so the debt-based system worked in that sense, where you have equity in your private property, and you can use that anytime you want to do it. Now, some people never did that because they were too conservative. They didn't want to take a risk, so they held on to their home, and that provided their retirement at that point. So that's nothing wrong with that, right? So at this point, the idea is to strip private property away from humanity altogether, put it into collective hands like the BlackRocks of the world, where the people of the world end up being a renter or a leasing or pay-per-view society. This is exactly what Klaus Schwab talked about 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, when he said, by 2030, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. I forget the happy part, I'm sure. But at this point, there's this conversion into an asset-based system has already begun, and I don't think we're going to have an easy time to stop it, because the people who were, the technocrats who were operating in the Trump administration, people like David Sachs, the crypto czar, people like, Peter Thiel was behind the scenes for sure. You have the Secretary of the Treasury now, the Besant. He's a huge fan of crypto, anything. You have the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, who just a few months ago lusted on national TV about the 680 million acres that the United States government owns at this point. And he said, if we could just take all that asset, all the resources, the mineral rights and the land, the timber and the farming and all that stuff, if we could just monetize all that and tokenize it, the golden age would be upon us to do that. Well, this is an expression of an asset-based economic system that's coming like a freight train at this point. How people will be able to navigate this, I don't know. I'm sure that gold and silver might be something to do, but the monetary system as we know it today probably is not going to survive into the future. People might have jobs. They have to have some income to buy stuff. But will there be an opportunity to save money, to pass an inheritance to your children? This is the big question right now. And I have to go back to, we started in 1932. Let me end here. The technocrats in 1932, they prescribed getting rid of money altogether, and they wanted to have an energy-based script that they would issue to everybody in society, kind of like universal basic income. And they wanted everybody to have, you'll have this certain amount of script. You can go and pay for goods and services based on the energy that went into those goods and services. It'll balance itself out. So they said, if you run out of energy credits script by the end of the period, like a month or a quarter, that you'd have to wait for a new allocation of energy script. In other words, mooch off of somebody, I guess. And if you save some up and the period expired, well, you're out of luck. They won't roll over like the minutes on your cell phone, right? There's no rollover plan.
Use them or lose them.
Yeah. So, and basically they disallowed private property altogether. They said, you don't need any private property at all in society. We're going to take care of you from birth to death. We'll get all the resources to you that you need to live. You'll have your energy script, but you'll have no private property, and you'll have no way to make a savings account. You have no way to give anything to your kids. So this is the dystopian dream that was hatched in 1932, and now we see, that's exactly what they're doing now. They have different means now because they don't have energy script based on pencil and paper, but now they have advanced technology to do the same thing to basically say, we're gonna give you all the goods and services you need throughout your lifetime. You're not going to save any money. You're not going to have an inheritance for anybody. And we'll take care of you we'll manage you like the cattle in a feedlot.
We've been talking with Patrick Wood, the founder of Coherent Publishing and the Technocracy News. Patrick, if people want to follow your work, and it's extensive, where would they best get started?
Technocracy.news for sure. And I have lots of resources there. I post articles all the time about it. I have commentary. I have a Technocracy boot camp that's been very popular recently. It's an e-learning course. Of course, all my books are available there. If you don't want to buy them from me, you can go to Amazon and you'll find the Kindle versions, the audiobook versions, and the paperback as well. Of course, if you buy it there, I can't sign them and or autograph a book for you. If you buy it from me, I'll do that. So that's the deal at this point. I started in the finance world in the first place. That was my career. I was a financial writer, and I morphed into precious metals sometime, and I morphed into other things relating to economic forecasting and so on. I gave all of that up. That was my career when I discovered historic technocracy. I really long for that life that I had before, because that was my comfort zone. I loved that stuff. I just loved it. But now when I discovered technocracy and how insidious it was, I had to tell the story. I just couldn't let it go. And here I am today in 2025. I'm certainly at the end of my career at this point. Somewhere along the way, I won't be able to do what I'm doing. But at this point, I still cannot let this go, because humanity doesn't have a clue what's coming at them at this point. They need to understand it. They really do.
Your message there resonates, as you know, with me and my sons who operate this channel, Liberty and Finance, because that's what my son said to me as a 16-year-old after he came back from investigating the roots of the rotten core of our monetary system. He said, "Dad, if this is true, I have to let people know. They can't continue not understanding what's wrong in our money system for their own good or that of their family and their children." So, Patrick, your heart is on the right place to be frequently with us here on Liberty and Finance. We hope we can make that happen. Thank you very much for being here. Folks, if you don't want to miss out on any episode that Patrick is going to do here or any of our other guests, make sure you're on our free mailing list by putting your email address in at libertyandfinance.com. That's our website, libertyandfinance.com, with your email address, and confirming on the first email you receive. You'll get one per day, and it'll be completely private, and you'll never miss a thing. Patrick, thank you for joining us this first time on Liberty and Finance.
My pleasure.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for October 27th through November 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 1-ounce gold Valcambi Combi Bars that can be broken into 10 1/10-ounce bars are just $215 over spot. Next, 90% constitutional silver is just 30 cents over spot per ounce. Finally, assorted silver rounds are just $2.99 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.